Something that's inevitable in pretty much any human relationship is that at some point, one person or the other, or both, cause pain or injury or hurt. And of course, it's wise to try to avoid hurting other people, but if we accept that at some point it's inevitable, we can turn our attention to how best to repair the relationships in our lives. And religions have been trying to figure this out since humanity existed. How can we avoid hurting other people, and also what do we do once we have hurt someone? When Jesus' disciples asked him how many times they should forgive someone for an injury, Jesus responded 7 times 70. And in saying that, he almost implied that forgiveness or repairing relationships is easy. But the truth is that turning a conflict around from a source of pain into a source of new life and healing and hope is hard work. Actually repairing relationships, usually it requires the humility to say, I was wrong. It requires the grit and perseverance to say, I'm willing to do the hard work required to repair this relationship because I know it's worth it. It's not always clear how we ought to do it. Sometimes we make mistakes trying to get it right. But when we listen to the other's response to the question, how can I help? Then we can begin to repair relationships. We definitely want to avoid some kind of a quick fix that might not match the situation. Actually, repairing relationship takes accountability, knowing that we're not going to cause that injury again. It takes understanding the context. For forgiveness to be real, we have to understand why the injury happened in the first place. What was going on, well, for both parties when that hurt happened, so that we can avoid it in the future. And it's when we overcome that hurt and that injury, that's when the relationship is actually strengthened. Like a broken bone can grow back stronger when it's healed. I'm not sure if that's true for a canoe, but I suppose a patch on a broken rib on a canoe might make it stronger in the same way. The work of repairing relationships almost always means taking on some kind of new perspective, or maybe hearing things differently than we had before. And often it requires some specialized tools or skills. To be able to make these repairs isn't something that always comes naturally. And it often means wading into some kind of a conflict situation. But resolving the conflict, transforming the conflict, is worth it. And I find that I often have to prepare a bit myself before I dive into the task of repairing relationship. I'm somebody who would prefer to avoid conflict. So when it comes time to actually making reparations and preparing for the possibility of conflict, I want to make sure that I've got everything in order. So I want to try to smooth out my own edges before jumping into the task at hand. And I also want to think about what is most important to come out of this. What are the needs that are at stake for me or for the other person? What are the hurts? What are the past hurts that might be present in this moment too? And of course, there are some relationships that are simply beyond repair. There's abuse, or past hurts are simply too great. But these should be relatively few. By and large, most relationships should be well within the realm of repair. Maybe in your conflict, you want to use something like nonviolent communication, NVC, wherein you're making observations and you're expressing feelings and needs, and then ultimately you're making a request. It's important to listen to the feelings and needs that are at play, then it's also important to move to that place of solution or request. What is the actual change you might be looking for? It's also helpful to know about yourself using like the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or one of those personality types or the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode tool. That can help you to know what your tendency is in conflict and whether that's a helpful tendency or a hurtful tendency. Ideally, we can collaborate when there's conflict and find something that's mutually beneficial even, to use conflict to transform, and that can actually bring flourishing. It can also be really helpful to have a third party witness the conflict resolution process. It's also really helpful when you can carve out some time and actually finish the conversation. Give yourself lots of time and schedule it so you can prepare in terms of knowing what you need, knowing what you're willing to give up to resolve the conflict. And it's not just that repairing relationships is important for our own flourishing. That is the case. But it's also the case that this approach of saving relationships is scalable. Thriving communities depend on the ability to resolve conflict. It's important that neighbors can get along somehow. It's important that geopolitical neighbors, geopolitical cousins, can find ways to resolve conflicts. Because in the absence of resolving these conflicts, we're left with devastation and war. And so we have to practice as individuals in our own relationships so that we can find unity rather than division. Nobody wins when we're divided. Everybody thrives when we're united. So would you seek to make these repairs to the relationships in your life? And eventually, the repairs that we make to our relationships will be tested again. And if we've done our best job to repair the relationship in the first injury, we'll have the trust and the confidence to know that we can make it through again and again, trusting that we are doing the best we can to avoid injuring somebody in the first place. And when accidents happen, then we can get through together, strengthen relationships for flourishing lives and flourishing communities. May you know relationships that bring you wholeness.